You won't believe how unexpectedly our quietly sold Saturday morning turned into the opening scene of a surreal legal thriller. I was on the front porch, flipping through case files and sipping coffee, tapping my slippers against the floorboards like I'd done every weekend for years, enjoying the hush before the week ahead. The driveway was bright, our street was calm, and everything felt perfect until that first horrifying chainsaw scream cut through the air like a broken record skipping in reverse. It was so loud, so mechanical, so utterly invasive that I dropped my coffee, eyes wide, mind blank. For a heartbeat, I didn't know if I'd lost my mind or if the world had gone mad. That scream, steel ripping through iron, shook me from every layer inside, compelling me to spring up, only to realize I was still clutching yesterday's newspaper. Mittened slippers planted firmly on the porch floor. Then, more noise, metal shavings spinning through the air, sparks arching across our driveway. And there they were, 3 people in matching Navy uniforms emblazoned with bold white letters, HO Authorized Patrol. No introduction, no knock, not even a scribbled notice stuck to the mailbox. Just them, chainsaw revving, clipping through the gate we spent thousands of dollars on, forged custom just 3 years earlier after we thought we'd jumped through every red tape hoop, every HOA approval. I sat there dumbstruck, processing. There was Tyler, chainsaw in hand, live-streaming the whole thing while barking instructions over the noise like he was frontlining a police drama. 2 others stood behind him holding clipboards and unwieldy paperwork, their faces stiff with whatever they called official demeanors. I think my first instinct was confusion, far more than anger because nothing about this feels remotely legal. My neighbor Denise appeared at her window across the street like a cautious stage observer, her expression tight with concern. I ducked behind the porch column, then tried to step onto the stairs, my mug slipping from my fingers as I demanded, "What the hell are you doing?" Tyler paused his stream, squinted at me, then cleared his throat and started reading from that clipboard. Citing Section 4.22 of the HOA Aesthetic Guideline, claiming our gate exceeded a 4-foot height limit, that iron wasn't an approved material, and then, like he'd caught lightning, he threw Section 12G of their security contract at me, calling it Emergency Authority, Emergency Aesthetic Violations. Since when is my gate being too tall an emergency? He then slid us a single, fresh-printed sheet. No letterhead, no signatures, nothing official, just a checkbox marked Immediate Removal Required, dated today. I flipped through papers left on the mailbox, forms typed in legal jargon that seemed to conjure authority out of thin air, and while he made his claim, I watched, stunned as metal bits scattered across our driveway like confetti. Tyler remained eerily calm, glancing at his phone like waiting for applause. One crew member whispered, "Should we wait for homeowner response?" And Tyler waved him off. Like consensus building. Doesn't matter when the chainsaw's alive. I'm standing at my own gate, watching as these people cut it in half under the camera's all-seeming blessing, flexing authority with the theatrics of a live performance. At that moment, the absurdity collapsed into dread. Then something even more surreal happened. My grandfather, Walter, appeared at the kitchen door holding his coffee, surveyed the chaos, set his mug down on his chair, then silently retreated inside. My heart hammered, but before I could shout, he re-emerged, calm and deliberate, carrying his old 12-gauge shotgun. He wasn't aimed at anyone. He sat himself down on the very porch chair where he'd left his mug, shotgun across his lap, barrel pointing to the ground, hands folded gently on the stock. He made no move, said no word, and yet the whole atmosphere shifted. The chainsaw went quiet. Tyler turned frozen. The crew looked ripped out of a reality they'd rehearsed. Birds started chirping again, and the sudden quiet was louder than the noise had ever been. Tyler, phone shaking, dialed 911 to report a homeowner threatening patrol officers. His voice cracked under pressure as he spoke, still streaming. 2 police cars arrived faster than I'd expect on a Saturday morning. The first officer out I knew from the courthouse. He looked sideways at Walter, doffed his hat, and whispered, "Should have figured it was the Harris place," under his breath with that tired, amused resignation that comes when you know trouble bags people with legal backbone, not screaming guns. The second officer moved over to the uniformed team while the first talked quietly with Walter. I watched, stunned as they appeared to speak in code, silent nods, calm rationality, while Tyler grew frantic, pointing at Walter's shotgun and demanding action, whipping his sentence into alarm overdrive. It was almost laughable, a serene grandfather versus an amateur bully wielding clipboard authority. That first cop checked the shotgun, chatted for 2 minutes, looked over the paperwork, then asked Tyler if proper notice had been given for property destruction. Tyler babbled, but the officer's expression turned flat. He asked if they'd followed 30-day notice protocols, damages assessments, due process. Tyler stumbled. The cops stood neutral, then simply waved him off, and Tyler's crew packed in defeat, leaving our gate half shredded, like they'd caught in their own trap of performance. Our neighbors watched from windows and lawns, Denise giving me a thumbs up, Mrs. Patterson in her bathrobe on her porch, the Johnsons gathered looking stunned. They all witnessed the performance collapse. That footage on the doorbell camera, crisp and high-def, held all of it. But at that moment, I still couldn't grasp that Walter had arranged the entire scenario. His calm was engineered, surgical. He didn't need to speak. He drew control. We gathered what was left of the gate, and Walter guided me inside. His kitchen was a different world, leather-aged cast iron and precision that felt historic, none of the earlier chaos. He cracked eggs, bacon sizzled, and he talked softly about maps. Not Google Maps, but county planning surveys, engineering schematics, meeting minutes from planning commission meetings back in the 1980s. As I listened between bursts of savory aroma, he started explaining how in 1984 he'd been the county planning commissioner reviewing environmental impact studies and infrastructure proposals that shaped our entire subdivision. His signature was on documents laying out property lines, utility easements, legal jurisdiction, created before our HOA even existed. That meant our property had grandfathered protection from later diktats, embedded into zoning law long before authorized patrol uniforms were ever a thing. I stared at him, half listening while reaching for another piece of bacon, the implications crashing into me like the chainsaw scream had. It meant our gate, our very property, was shielded. He produced his manila folder of county planning documents, archival correspondence, boundary agreements, original signatures with his hand listed as approving authority. That redirection turned this from drama into defense. No wonder he'd stayed so calm. That quiet man at the breakfast table had been quietly building the legal foundation that could demolish authority overreach without firing a shot. Word spread through our block like wildfire that afternoon. Mrs. Patterson asked about her yard. The Johnsons worried their landscaping might be next. And Walter patiently explained zoning history, grandfathered protections, procedural requirements that HOAs must follow or couldn't. Those conversations quickly transformed his kitchen table into a mini legal clinic. Meanwhile, Tyler and his Patrol Shield group cooked up a new invoice demanding $12,700, an absurd bill for emergency board consultation, enhanced patrol operations, and even a psychological evaluation for Walter. The items were laughable, but the intent was clear. Intimidation with paperwork. Walter scanned the document, dissected math errors, pointed out improper billing in state HOA finance law, and I could see how this all was creating a record of violation, intimidation, and escalating fraud. This wasn't just gate enforcement gone wild, it was building a criminal case piece by weird piece. By Tuesday morning, lawyers, neighbors, activists were at our doorstep, requesting copies of county survey records, planning docs. Walter's quiet credibility was ceremonial. I uploaded the doorbell video with a simple title, Security company destroys property without warning. It was supposed to reach a few locals, but by Wednesday morning it had exploded. From 1,000 views to 50,000. People sharing grievances about HOAs gone rogue, patrol uniforms masquerading as authority, private security overreach. From Arizona to Georgia, people were telling their stories, describing fake badges, bogus fines, intimidation tactics. Walter's demonstration was becoming therapy for surveillance-weary homeowners nationwide. And the footage wasn't just viral, it was evidence. Commentary channels picked it up, legal blogs dissected it, constitutional lawyers weighed in from live streams. University professors began calling, asking to use the video for educational purposes. Media outlets reached out, local stations, then regional news. The narrative of elder quiet strength protecting property rights struck a chord. Meanwhile, cyber detectives pulled Tyler's past streams, finding worse. Unauthorized enforcement runs, threats, impersonation of public authority. He'd filmed his own criminality. That would be a prosecutorial goldmine. Tyler's desperation peaked when Elaine, the HOA's lawyer and developer's rep, attempted damage control livestream on Wednesday. She sat in a staged law office framed by legal tomes, but as the chat lit up with questions about proper notice and legal standing, she couldn't answer. The chat threw document screen caps at her, metadata popped up, and her credibility unraveled faster than she'd downloaded data that day. The digital public was fact-checking her in real time with timestamps. Location data, archived footage she'd left online. Amateur forensics became unstoppable. By Thursday, archival preservation campaigns started. Screenshots, archived streams, metadata hunters. They were all pulling content to make sure Tyler's channel couldn't scrub the evidence. Meanwhile, memes of Walter sitting with the shotgun, peaceful, deliberate, were turning into symbols of citizen resistance, constitutional education, calm authority. Legal aid groups offered to represent potential plaintiffs. Schools asked to use the case in their HOA management courses. International media even picked up the story. Suburban pistol-packing grandpa defends American liberty, they headlined. That one short clip conveying more than 1,000 law lectures ever could. Our quiet block had become center of a constitutional education moment. The community rallied too. Neighbors organized to document which properties had grandfather exemptions. Historical societies reached out to preserve records. Legislation proposals started circulating about private security certification, HOA enforcement authority limits, due process legal requirements. And Walter, always calm, sprawled through it all, guiding neighborhood organizers, talking policy over meals, pointing out archives no one had known existed. His manila folder became a symbol. Patience, preparation, legal foundation. Wednesday morning, still stunned by the reach, I gently knocked on his study door. He welcomed me into the dim, leather-scented room packed with filing cabinets, certificates, precise stacks of documents, and decades of organized papers. Foundations, he called it. He placed one final document on his desk with the slow solemnity of someone unveiling history. It was the original 1984 county development contract, signed by him as planning commissioner, but crucially signed by Elaine Barker as the developer's legal representative. She'd fought for grandfathered exemptions, made legal arguments in court that zoning protections must hold. The irony was devastating. She'd created the legal weapon now shielding us from her own authority. She'd bargained for Homeowner Protections Department. Her own legal work was now our shield. Unraveling that envelope unrolled narratives of her transformation from property rights lawyer into enforcement dictator hungry to charge fees to survive a divorce settlement that strained her financially. Her push for gated community status would have raised property values. She'd turned the legal structure she'd crafted into a weapon for personal gain. The contracts, correspondences, emails, They disclosed boundary manipulation, inflated membership numbers, jurisdictional deception, all the way to HOA insurance fraud. Insurance filings had misrepresented risk by including properties she'd never had legal domain over. The evidence, once revealed, was devastating. Walter revealed he'd been gathering that over months, quietly letting everyone think he was just the old grandpa who fixed bikes and loved morning coffee. Every conversation, every neighbor question had been careful intelligence gathering. Then, when the moment came, the grand reveal was water cooler dynamite. We planned a community meeting at the center the coming Tuesday. A live-streamed event, packed as Walter arrived with chocolate chip cookies and a gentle smile. The treats proved tactical genius. In an atmosphere thick with legal tension, handing out cookies transformed the mood into something human, disarming the aggressive posture Elaine had hoped to wield. She entered, strong, briefcase in hand, polished presentation aimed at control, but the smell of baked goods, the warmth of community, made her corporate bravado shrivel. In that room, framed by overhead lights and shared laughter, the truth came out, maps and slideshow, documentation fading her enforcement into petty ambition. Resident testimonials in between cookie munching shifted audience allegiance entirely. Elaine's staged argument collapsed under the weight of kindness, facts, community solidarity. By Wednesday afternoon, TV crews were filming, law professors were quoting. Digital forensics teams were helping us prepare criminal referrals. Tyler's channel was suspended for impersonation, harassment, violations of terms of service. Elaine's HOA board was under investigation. Crowdfunding flowed in for legal fees. The legal textbooks were already updating their HOA chapters. The courtroom hearings felt inevitable. When we finally stepped into that packed courthouse with Walter poised and dignified, everything clicked. His testimony, the footage, the documents, all built an ironclad case. His careful presence in that chair, with the shotgun laid respectfully across his lap, articulated the difference between force and authority. His words, "I never intended to fire that shotgun, Your Honor." That morning, I only fired a message with my presence, resonated through the room in waves. Elaine's attempts to justify emergency enforcement crumbled. Tyler's admission of intimidation tactics provided conspiracy evidence. Elaine's own 1984 brief shredded her credibility. The judge ruled in our favor. Damages awarded, invoices voided, public apology mandated, criminal charges referred, HOA powers curtailed. Lessons about procedure, jurisdiction, property rights, and well-placed calm were institutionalized in court. Tyler was sentenced to community service in constitutional education programs. Elaine was banned from HOA leadership and fined, and vindicated only in history books as a cautionary tale. Weeks later, the gate was rebuilt. A new iron gate under 4 feet, compliant, glimmering under morning light. A statement, not just a replacement. A small live-stream camera faced the street, flashing, "Constitution protected, justice served," and beneath it, neighbors gathered to watch. Signage denouncing fake patrol branding was removed, dumped, and we installed a plaque. "This gate stands for Constitutional Rights Defended, 1984, protected forever." QR codes next to it linked to the full doorbell footage, ensuring this story would educate future generations. Neighborhood dynamics shifted. HOA board became resident empowered. Children played in yards that once felt policed. Democratic oversight returned. National HOA certification programs included our case in curriculum. Constitutional law professors taught the Harris Standard. Visitors came to Walter's porch seeking guidance. The case influenced state legislation regulating private security, HOA authority, and procedural due process. International watchers hailed it as an American epic of quiet defense. Walter's routine resumed: morning coffee, newspaper, constitutional chats with neighbors, peaceful mentorship. The shotgun was locked away, unnecessary, because we protected our rights through preparation, patience, evidence, and unwavering calm. That morning, when the chainsaw screamed, didn't end in destruction. It ended in a community fortified by law, a precedent established, and the most powerful message sent not with gunpowder, but with presence. Justice didn't shout. It watched, waited, and stood its ground.